I'll never forget the first moment I realized something was wrong. It was a Thursday night in late September, and I was working late at the office in Midtown Manhattan when my phone buzzed with a message from my friend Eric. "Hey, is Jessica supposed to be at Le Bernardin tonight? Thought you had that board dinner." My stomach dropped. Jessica, my wife of 7 years, knew I'd be working late, but we always texted if plans changed. I tried to brush it off, but curiosity got the best of me. I opened up Jessica's Instagram, and there it was, a story post of her at the restaurant, laughing over a glass of wine. But what really caught my attention was the reflection in the window behind her. A man, someone I didn't recognize, was sitting across from her, leaning in close. Jessica has always been magnetic. She's the kind of woman who walks into a room, and everyone notices, tall with chestnut hair that falls in waves past her shoulders and sharp green eyes that seem to see right through you. She's ambitious too, and I always admired that about her. But as I stared at that photo, a cold wave of suspicion washed over me. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that it was probably just a friend from work. Still, something didn't add up. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I asked Jessica casually about her evening. She smiled, said she'd grabbed dinner with some colleagues after a late meeting. Her tone was breezy, almost rehearsed. I wanted to believe her, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, a hesitation I'd never noticed before. I let it go, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next week, I started noticing things I'd missed before. Jessica's phone was suddenly always face down on the table. She started working late more often, and her laughter when she texted seemed a little too bright, a little too forced. She even changed her perfume, something she hadn't done in years. I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was being paranoid, but the evidence kept piling up. The breaking point came the following Saturday. We were invited to a friend's birthday dinner at a rooftop bar in Soho. Jessica arrived separately, saying she had errands to run. When she walked in, she was glowing, her hair perfectly styled, wearing a new dress I hadn't seen before. She greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, but her eyes darted around the room, searching for someone. I caught her glancing at her phone, smiling at a message. Halfway through the night, I stepped out onto the balcony for some air. That's when I saw her, Jessica, standing in a quiet corner with the same man from the restaurant. He was younger, maybe early 30s, with sandy hair and a confident smile. They were laughing, standing just a little too close. My heart pounded in my chest. I realized, in that instant, that my wife was openly dating another man. And everyone but me seemed to know. I didn't confront her, not yet. I needed to know more. I needed proof. And as much as it hurt, I decided I wouldn't let emotion get the better of me. I would play the long game. If Jessica wanted to play with fire, she had no idea who she was dealing with. The days that followed felt like I was living someone else's life. I went through the motions at work, but my mind was always somewhere else, replaying every conversation, every late night, every unexplained smile Jessica had given me over the past few months. I realized how much I'd missed, how many signs I'd ignored because I trusted her. But trust, I was learning, could be a dangerous thing. I decided I needed answers, not just suspicions. That's when I reached out to a private investigator. His name was Tom, a no-nonsense guy with a reputation for discretion. We met in a quiet coffee shop near Bryant Park. I handed him a photo of Jessica and explained what I'd seen. He nodded, asked a few questions, and assured me he'd be in touch soon. I felt a strange mix of shame and relief, ashamed that my marriage had come to this, relieved that I wasn't crazy. Tom worked fast. Within days he sent me photos, Jessica and the same man, together again, this time at a gallery opening in Chelsea. They looked comfortable, almost intimate. Tom did some digging and found out the man's name was Ryan Carter. He was a junior partner at Jessica's firm, ambitious, charming, and apparently very interested in my wife. Seeing them together in those photos hurt more than I expected. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the realization that Jessica didn't even care who saw them. She was living her new life out in the open, and I was just a shadow in the background. I started paying closer attention at social events. Jessica would introduce Ryan as a colleague, but the way she looked at him made it clear there was more. At a charity auction, I watched as she laughed at his jokes, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Friends and acquaintances shot me. Sympathetic glances, some too polite to say anything, others whispering behind my back. The humiliation was suffocating, but I forced myself to keep my composure. I wouldn't give Jessica or Ryan the satisfaction of seeing me break. At home, things grew colder. Jessica was polite but distant, always distracted, always somewhere else in her mind. I tried to talk to her to bridge the growing gap, but she brushed me off with excuses about work and stress. I started sleeping in the guest room, telling myself it was just temporary. But deep down I knew the truth. Our marriage was already over. I just hadn't admitted it yet. One night I found myself scrolling through Jessica's social media. She'd posted a photo from a recent corporate retreat, standing next to Ryan, both of them smiling for the camera. The caption read, "Great minds, great company." The comments were full of inside jokes and heart emojis from their colleagues. It was all there, hiding in plain sight. I realized Jessica wasn't just cheating, she was flaunting it. That's when something inside me shifted. The pain was still there, but it hardened into resolve. If Jessica wanted to play this game so openly, I would play too, but I wouldn't be reckless. I would be smart, patient, and meticulous. I started documenting everything. Texts, emails, social media posts. I kept a record of every event, every encounter, every lie. I knew I'd need it all when the time came. The hardest part was pretending nothing was wrong. At work, I smiled and shook hands, closed deals, and kept up appearances. At home, I played the dutiful husband, even as my heart broke a little more each day. But every moment of pain was fuel for the plan I was building in my mind. I wasn't sure how or when, but I knew one thing. When the time was right, Jessica would realize she'd underestimated me, and Ryan would learn that not every game ends the way you expect. As fall deepened in the city, Jessica's affair became impossible to ignore. She stopped pretending. There was no more careful secrecy, no more half-hearted attempts to hide her new relationship. Ryan was everywhere. He started showing up at our favorite restaurants, at gallery openings, even at the gym where Jessica and I used to work out together. It was like she wanted me to see, to feel every ounce of humiliation she could deliver. I'd catch them exchanging glances across crowded rooms, her lips curling into that sly smile I once thought was just for me. The worst part was how quickly our friends and colleagues caught on. At first, there were awkward silences and forced small talk when Jessica and Ryan arrived together at events. But soon the whispers started. People would look at me with a mix of pity and curiosity, as if wondering how I could possibly endure it. I overheard my name in conversations I wasn't meant to hear. Poor Michael. He deserves better. How could she do that to him? It didn't matter that I was a partner at one of the most respected firms in Manhattan, or that I'd built a life with Jessica from the ground up. In those moments, I was just the man whose wife was openly dating another man. Yeah. One night, at an industry gala hosted by a major client, Jessica arrived with Ryan on her arm. She wore a stunning emerald dress that set off her green eyes, her hair. Styled in soft waves, she looked radiant, almost untouchable. Ryan, younger and full of bravado, seemed to relish the attention. They made no effort to hide their affection, laughing, whispering, sharing inside jokes. I stood across the room, surrounded by colleagues, pretending not to notice. But every laugh, every touch, felt like a knife. The humiliation reached its peak when Jessica introduced Ryan to a group of our mutual friends. "This is Ryan," she said, her voice bright. "We've been working on some exciting projects together." The group exchanged glances, unsure how to respond. I forced a smile, shook Ryan's hand, and felt the weight of every eye in the room on me. In that moment, I realized Jessica wasn't just betraying me. She was erasing me, rewriting our story with someone new. That night, I barely made it through dinner. I excused myself early, claiming a headache, and walked home alone through the city streets. The pain was sharp, but it was also clarifying. I knew I couldn't let this continue. I refused to be the victim in Jessica's narrative. If she wanted to play this out in public, then that's exactly where I'd end it. Back at home, I sat in the dark and mapped out my next steps. I reviewed the evidence I'd collected: photos, messages, receipts, social media posts. I started consulting with a lawyer discreetly, making sure my finances and assets were protected. I wanted to be ready for whatever came next. I even began to rehearse what I'd say, how I'd reveal the truth in a way that no one could ignore or deny. But above all, I focused on keeping my composure. I knew the final act had to be perfect. I would wait for the right moment, the right audience. I would let Jessica have her spotlight, let her believe she'd won. And when she least expected it, I'd show her and everyone else that I was not the man to be pitied. I was the man who would have the last laugh. The days leading up to my plan were some of the longest of my life. Every morning, I woke up determined to keep my mask firmly in place. I went about my business, attended meetings, and even managed to share a few polite words with Jessica when our paths crossed at home. She seemed lighter, almost giddy, as if the weight of secrecy had finally lifted from her shoulders. She started spending even more time out late dinners, weekend work trips, and charity events that always seemed to include Ryan. I let her have her freedom, knowing I was quietly preparing for the end game. My lawyer, Susan, was a godsend. She was sharp, discreet, and had seen enough ugly divorces to know exactly what needed to be done. We met in her office, high above the city, where she patiently explained my options. Together we secured my assets, documented every detail of Jessica's infidelity, and made sure the legal groundwork was solid. Susan reminded me that timing was everything. "You only get one shot at this, Michael," she said. "Make it count." I took her words to heart. Meanwhile, I continued to gather evidence. I saved every text Jessica sent me that contradicted her whereabouts, every social media post that showed her with Ryan when she claimed to be somewhere else. Tom, the private investigator, delivered a final batch of photos: Jessica and Ryan holding hands in Central Park, sharing a kiss outside a theater, checking into a boutique hotel downtown. The file was thick, undeniable, and meticulously organized. As the annual charity gala for my firm approached, I knew I'd found the perfect stage. The gala was one of the most prestigious events in our social circle, an evening of elegance attended by business leaders, friends, and family. It was the kind of night where reputations were made and destroyed. I spent weeks planning every detail, from the guest list to the seating chart, making sure all the right people would be there. I even arranged for a discreet AV setup just in case I needed to present my evidence in a way no one could ignore. Jessica, of course, was excited for the gala. She bought a new dress, scheduled a hair appointment, and talked endlessly about who might attend. She assumed, as always, that she was in control. She even hinted that she might bring Ryan as her +1 under the guise of work. I told her that was fine, masking my true feelings behind a calm, almost indifferent smile. Inside, my nerves were taut, but I refused to let them show. The night before the gala, I barely slept. I rehearsed my words in front of the mirror, imagining every possible reaction. Would Jessica deny it? Would Ryan try to defend her? Would our friends turn away in disgust or rally to my side? I didn't know, and I didn't care. All I wanted was the truth out in the open, for everyone to see the real story behind Jessica's perfect facade. On the day of the event, I dressed with care, classic black tuxedo, polished shoes, every detail immaculate. I arrived early, checking the sound system and making sure my evidence was ready to go at a moment's notice. As the ballroom filled with laughter and music, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. This was it. The stage was set, and all that remained was to see how the final act would unfold. I watched as Jessica entered, radiant as ever with Ryan by her side. She scanned the room, her eyes lingering on me for just a moment before she turned away. I smiled to myself, knowing that tonight everything would change. The gala shimmered with elegance and tension. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the hum of conversation filled the air as Manhattan's elite mingled over champagne. I moved through the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries, all while keeping one eye on Jessica and Ryan. They looked every bit the glamorous couple, laughing with guests, posing for photos, and acting as if nothing in the world could touch them. Jessica's emerald dress caught the light, her green eyes flashing with excitement. Ryan, ever the charmer, seemed to thrive on the attention, basking in the glow of Jessica's affection and the whispers that followed them. I waited patiently, letting the evening build to its crescendo. The program moved through speeches and awards, the energy in the room growing as anticipation for the charity auction mounted. I could feel the eyes of friends and colleagues on me, some curious, others sympathetic. I kept my composure, smiling and making small talk, but inside, my heart pounded with a mix of anxiety and resolve. Finally, as dessert was being served, I excused myself and made my way to the stage. The room quieted as I took the microphone, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began, glancing briefly at Jessica and Ryan. Jessica's smile faltered just for a second, as if she sensed something was coming. "This event is about honesty, generosity, and community. Tonight, I'd like to share something personal, something about truth." A hush fell over the ballroom. I signaled to the AV technician, who dimmed the lights and queued up the projector. On the giant screen behind me, photos began to appear. Jessica and Ryan together at the gallery, walking hand in Central Park, sharing a kiss outside the theater. Each image was time-stamped, each one contradicting the stories Jessica had told me and our friends. The room was silent, the tension almost unbearable. I kept my voice calm as I narrated. Sometimes the truth hides in plain sight. Sometimes we ignore what we don't want to see. But tonight, I choose to see clearly. I looked directly at Jessica, whose face had gone pale, her eyes wide with shock. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the bravado gone. Around them, guests exchanged stunned glances, some covering their mouths in disbelief. Jessica tried to stand, to say something, but the damage was done. The evidence was irrefutable. I finished my speech with a simple statement. I wish you both the best. I hope you find the happiness you were searching for. Then I stepped down from the stage, my heart racing but my head held high. The reaction was immediate and electric. Some guests rushed to comfort me, others confronted Jessica and Ryan, demanding answers. The whispers that had haunted me for weeks now turned into open conversations. Jessica, once the center of attention, now found herself isolated, her perfect image shattered in front of everyone she tried to impress. I felt a strange sense of relief, a weight lifting from my shoulders. For the first time in months, I was no longer the victim. I had taken control of my story, exposing the truth in the most public way possible. As I left the ballroom, the city lights sparkling outside, I knew the hardest part was over. The world finally saw Jessica and Ryan for who they truly were, and I walked away with my dignity and the last laugh. In the days following the gala, my world changed in ways I never could have predicted. The fallout was swift and merciless. Jessica's phone blew up with calls and messages, most of them from friends and colleagues who had witnessed her public unmasking. The woman who once commanded every room she entered now found herself the subject of gossip and judgment. Her social media, once a highlight reel of glamorous events and romantic captions, turned eerily silent. Even her closest friends began to distance themselves, unsure how to reconcile the woman they thought they knew with the truth that had been laid bare. Ryan didn't fare much better. Word spread quickly through their firm, and it wasn't long before HR got involved. Office romances were one thing, but the scandal of their affair so public, so brazen, was another. I heard through mutual contacts that Ryan was quietly asked to take a leave of absence. The ambitious young man who had strutted through the gala with Jessica on his arm was suddenly invisible, his rise through the company halted by his own recklessness. As for Jessica and me, the divorce moved forward with a speed and clarity I hadn't expected. My lawyer, Susan, made sure every detail was handled with precision. The evidence I'd collected left no room for negotiation. Jessica tried to reach out a few times, first with apologies, then with anger, and finally with resignation. I responded only through my attorney. There was nothing left to say. The woman I'd loved for so many years was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. But amid the chaos, something surprising happened. People I hadn't spoken to in years reached out with support, old friends, colleagues, even acquaintances, who had watched the drama unfold from a distance. They told me they admired how I'd handled myself, how I'd refused to stoop to bitterness or revenge. For the first time in a long while, I felt respected, not just as a businessman or a husband, but as a person who had faced betrayal and chosen dignity. The healing process wasn't easy. There were nights when the apartment felt unbearably empty, when memories of better times threatened to drown me in regret. But with each passing day, I found new strength. I threw myself into work, took up running again, and started reconnecting with the city I loved. I discovered a quiet joy in simple things. Sunrise runs along the Hudson, coffee with friends, evenings spent reading instead of worrying about who Jessica was texting. Looking back, I realized the real victory wasn't exposing Jessica and Ryan. The real victory was reclaiming my own life, my own narrative. I learned that sometimes the only way to move forward is to let go of what's holding you back, even if it's someone you once loved deeply. I learned that dignity isn't something others can give or take away. It's something you choose every day, no matter how much it hurts. Now, when people ask about that night, I don't dwell on the betrayal or the spectacle. I tell them it was the moment I finally saw things clearly, the moment I stopped living in someone else's shadow. Jessica may have thought she was rewriting our story, but in the end, I wrote the final chapter. And as I step into the future, I do so with my head held high, knowing that in the end, I truly had the last laugh.